If your kids love stories, then this week's kid podcast is one you are definitely going to want to try. It's about Bella the cow, who is a delightful character that gets into all sorts of mischief. The host, Kristien Kaelen, is from Denmark, and she does a lovely job translating this podcast into 3 languages. I'm Andy Smiley, the Friendly Podcast Guide. I'm a mom who has used podcasts to fight the boredom and loneliness of motherhood, and now I want to help you find a podcast that can do the same thing for you. It can be overwhelming to try and find a podcast you'll enjoy in the thousands of shows that are out there. That's where I come in. My episodes are short, and they answer all of the questions you'll have about the podcast, so you'll know if it's a good fit for you or not. I'm here to help you find a podcast you'll love without wasting your time. Now, let's talk podcasts. Kristien describes the show like this. Bella is a singing cow from Obergurgl, Austria, who gets thrown into all sorts of adventures. The length of each episode is 10 minutes. The series is ongoing with new episodes available on the weekends. Before we learn more about the vibe of the show, we're going to take a quick break to talk about my guide to kid podcasts. One of my favorite parenting tools is kid podcasts. I use them when I'm running errands with the kiddos to keep them from complaining the whole time, or when I need a mom break, I'll just grab an easy activity like coloring pages or a sensory bin, turn on a kid podcast, and the kids will be entertained for at least half an hour. I know that kid podcasts would help you in your life too, which is why I made a guide to kid podcasts. There are 8 categories ranging from science to mindfulness to audio drama with at least 3 podcasts in each category. There are 27 podcasts in total on the guide. I've listened to each of the podcasts on this guide, so I can attest to them being kid-friendly. And I put my email at the bottom of the guide so that if you try a couple with your kids and none of them are a good fit, you can email me and I will personally help you find a kid podcast that works for your littles and you. You can grab this guide at the link in the show notes. Now we get to hear from Kristien as she talks about all of the people that come together to make this podcast possible. And the audio is a little bit more echoey than normal, but I promise Kristien's stories are totally worth the echo. Kristien, I am so excited to talk about your kid podcast today on my show. Before we dive in, can you introduce yourself a little bit to my listeners?
Yeah, of course. I'm Kristien Kaelen. I live in Belgium, in Brussels. I'm a mother of 2 sons, but my sons are quite old already. They're 18 and 21, so I don't have any small children anymore. And I'm a lawyer, but at the moment I'm not working as a lawyer. So that's it.
Lovely. So you have a podcast called Bella the Cow. How did that come to be?
All right. Well, that's actually quite a long story. When my children were young, I used to read books every evening with them. And then after they went to bed, after their stories, I would play the piano. And they loved that. It was a great time. They loved it. I loved it. And one day we were on holiday in Austria, in a little village called Obergurgl. And I had forgotten the books at home. And my youngest, Philip, he insisted on having a story. He wanted to have a story. So we were in the mountains and I had to invent a story. So I invented a story about a cow. I called the cow Bella. And for the rest of the whole day, I told him the story of Bella the cow. And once we got home, he insisted in having both a book and a story about Bella the cow. So I think I must have told them every evening for a year or so stories about Bella the cow. And then my sister's children are quite a bit younger. And one day, a couple of years ago, I went to babysit because they live in a different country. They live in Switzerland. I went to babysit for them for a week. And they said, "Oh, Auntie Kiki, can you tell us a story?" So I thought, why not? I'll dig up all the old stories that I still have, somewhere in my head. And so I told them a Bella the cow story every evening. And at the end of the week, Hannah told me, she said, "Well, Auntie Kiki," she says, "why don't you write a book so that lots of children can enjoy the stories of Bella the cow?" And instead of writing a book, it became a podcast.
That is lovely. My kids love kid podcasts, really, truly. And I love the idea of just a story. Like story podcasts are pretty much my favorite anyway. And having a story kid podcast is just perfect because sometimes we just need a good story to listen to and enjoy and like activate the kids' imaginations. So I'm very grateful.
Well, good.
So what do you want kids and I guess their parents to get out of your podcast?
Well, actually, I just want them to have a good time and to have 10 minutes or so in their own little world, the little world of Bella the cow, high up in the mountains, where there are no wars, no inflation, no worries. And I think a lot of parents actually listen to the stories as well. So they find it, I think that's what I heard, at least, they find it quite relaxing. So I just want them to have a good time.
I love that.
Feel good stories, basically. I don't want them to give any message, but sometimes there's a hidden message. Like, I don't know if you listen to the story The Party, but that is sort of about if you don't get invited to a party and everyone is invited to a party and you're not invited, you don't need to feel bad about it because there are plenty of kids that never get invited. So you can make a big party with all those kids, so there's sometimes a little bit of a message in it, but the purpose is not to give them a message. It's just for them to have a good time.
Definitely. And that's all we need sometimes, right?
Exactly.
So how would you describe the vibe of your show?
The feel-good part of it. I think I want people to when they've listened to my story, to feel happy and upbeat and without any worries. So just feel-good vibe. And also, I don't know if you know, but I play, in some of the stories, I play the piano and I try to, it doesn't always work well with the story, but I try to have upbeat music or a little bit jazzy or boogie and that kind of thing.
Oh my goodness, that is so fun. Oh, I love that. And I absolutely love that you're just going for a feel-good vibe because that is just all we need sometimes. And especially kids, sometimes you just need a reminder that everything's going to be okay. And Bella the cow does that.
Exactly. And there are a bit of crazy stories that, obviously never would happen. And so I think that makes it fun for kids as well, because it gets them to imagine all sorts of crazy stuff that can happen to a cow. So if it happens to a cow, why not to a human being? So, yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to ask you what your favorite episode is in just a second. But first, can you tell me where can people find you?
Okay. So I'm on Spotify, which I guess you have in the US. I'm on Apple Podcast. I'm on a few channels here in Europe, which you might not have in the US, but I also have a website where they can find all the drawings and the colorings as well, because for each of the stories, I have 5 drawings and 1 coloring page. So they can find that on www.bellapodcast.com. And so you can change the language because my podcast exists in 3 languages. I'm Flemish and my kids went to school in French. So I have it in Dutch, French, and English. But so at the top of the page, you can actually switch the language to English. And so there you can find, for each story, you can find 5 drawings and 1 coloring and a little bit of explanation as to what piano piece is used in the story, which is not, in the beginning I didn't do that. So the first 5 stories or so don't have any piano music, but then later on you'll find for each story also a piece of music in it that I play myself together with a friend of mine.
That is absolutely lovely.
And so one of my friends is making all the drawings, and she's called Sylviane, and another friend called Adeline is playing the piano with me. So we're basically 4 women working on it, but the stories are mine and I record them, but Sylviane does the drawings and Adeline helps with the piano.
That is fabulous. I'm so glad you have a whole team that's helping you bring Bella to life.
Yeah, thank you.
And also a huge accomplishment that it's in 3 languages. That is a lot and awesome.
Yeah, so if your kids want to learn French, they can listen to the French version. I don't know in the US if many people learn French. I guess it's mainly English and Spanish, maybe, I don't know. But if there are any expats living in the US who are bilingual children, it also exists in Dutch and French in addition to English.
That is so cool. I love that. I just want to listen to it just for me, just to like hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now is the time. Do you have a favorite episode or a couple of favorite episodes?
Actually, that's a very difficult question. I think I like the cow wash a lot and the trampoline. But I think each of the stories has got something I think that I like. So yeah, but my favorite, I guess, is the trampoline and the cow wash. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, I'll make sure to link those in the show notes so that people can go straight to them and listen to your favorites. What age range would you say your kid podcast is for?
I think as of 4 years old, 4 to 9, I think.
Okay.
But actually, funny enough, I know adults who listen to it, and friends of my kids who are 20 years old listen to it as well. I think at the beginning, probably just to find out what I did and for fun, but then they got the hang of it. I think they just like it because it's feel good and funny and with a little bit of music, and they're quite short as well. Usually my episodes last for 10 minutes, so it doesn't take too much time.
I love that. Well, I love a short podcast. That's why I make a short podcast. So I'm all for a short podcast. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't touched on yet?
No, you can also find me on Instagram. I think I forgot to tell you that. I'm also on Instagram. And I recently started a TikTok account because my children told me, Mama, if you wanted to grow, you need to be on TikTok. But I don't think that works so well for my podcast. But on Instagram, you'll find me as well. And there I make little videos as well of the piano pieces, which is fun. And yeah, you can find lots of other stuff there that is not on my website. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. I'll make sure to link your Instagram account as well. I have a TikTok too, and it is interesting trying to make the podcast like into TikTok, like consumable content. So I totally get it. Fabulous. That's everything. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I cannot wait to introduce Bella the cow to all of my listeners.
And I thank you very much because I think it's great that you can publicize it so that more kids can enjoy Bella the cow. So thank you so much for the opportunity that you've given me.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you know someone who could use Bella the cow, if you know someone or a family who could use Bella the cow in their life, will you share this episode with them? Also, if you need another tool in your parenting tool belt, grab my kid podcast guide. Talk to you soon.